The room was silent, so silent that even the ticking of the old courthouse clock seemed too loud. Every face in the courtroom was frozen, eyes wide, mouths half open. The air was thick with confusion and fear. The judge, a man known for his iron expression and calm authority, had suddenly gone pale as chalk. His lips trembled, his hands gripped the edge of the bench, and for a moment he forgot to breathe. All this because Kofi had leaned forward and whispered two words. No one heard what he said. The crowd strained their necks, desperate to catch a sound, a clue, anything. Even Madame Essie, his stepmother, stopped smiling for the first time that day. Her confident smirk melted into something between anger and terror. The judge's gavel slipped from his hand and hit the desk with a hollow sound that echoed like thunder. The clerk blinked in confusion. The bailiff froze, and whispers began to ripple through the crowd. What did he say? Someone whispered from the back. Did you see the judge's face? Another muttered. Maybe he cursed him. Someone else said under their breath. But Kofi didn't move. He stood still, tall, calm, and unshaken. His eyes met the judge's for a long, heavy moment, and something unspoken passed between them. Outside, clouds gathered over the small town, covering the sun. A wind swept through the open windows, carrying dust and a strange chill. It was as if nature itself had paused to listen. Madame Essie's lawyer rose, clearing his throat nervously. Your Honor, is there a problem? The judge didn't answer. He simply raised a trembling hand, gesturing for silence. His gaze remained fixed on Kofi, as though he was seeing not just the man before him, but something far greater, something ancient. Kofi finally broke the silence. His voice was low but steady. You wanted the truth, he said softly. Now the truth has spoken. The crowd gasped. Even those who had come to mock him, to watch his humiliation, felt a shiver run down their spine. Madame Essie slammed her palm on the table. This is madness, she cried. Judge, don't let this boy play tricks. He's trying to bewitch the court. But her voice cracked halfway through. Her eyes darted toward Kofi's hand, where he still held the small, old parchment sealed with a faded red mark. The judge stood slowly, his chair scraping the wooden floor. His face was drained of color, his voice barely above a whisper. Where did you hear those words? Kofi met his gaze without fear. From my father, he said. And before him, from his father. It's an oath older than this court. Older than all of us. Gasps filled the room again. Even the clerk crossed himself quietly. Everyone in that town knew about the oath of the earth, an ancient vow said to bind truth to the soil itself. Those who invoked it wrongly invited the wrath of the ancestors. The judge's knees seemed to weaken. He sat back down heavily and rubbed his temples. For a few seconds, no one dared to move or speak. Finally, he whispered, Court. We'll recess for 10 minutes. He didn't look at anyone else. He only stared at Kofi, his face pale and wet with sweat, as if the whisper still echoed in his mind. Kofi turned slowly, his expression unreadable. As he walked back to his seat, the people moved aside. Even Madame Essie lowered her eyes for a moment, though pride quickly forced her chin up again. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. No one yet knew what those two words meant. No one knew why the judge turned pale. But one thing was clear: nothing in that courtroom would ever be the same again. The air smelled of rain and grief. The sky hung heavy over the small Ghanaian town of Asaboy, where the people gathered in black cloths and red scarves, mourning the death of Chief Oyusuf, a man who had been both a pillar of wisdom and the wealthiest cocoa farmer in 3 districts. Drums beat softly in the distance, the rhythm slow and respectful, as if the earth itself was bidding farewell to one of its own. Kofi stood apart from the crowd, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. His black cloth clung to him as the wind brushed through the tall palm trees. People came to shake his hand, whispering the same words over and over. Accept my condolences. He was a great man. He nodded politely each time, but his heart felt numb. The world around him seemed unreal, the chanting, the wailing women, the smell of burning incense. It all blurred into one long, aching moment. Then, through the crowd, came her. Madame Essie, his father's second wife. Her steps were measured, her face painted with just enough sorrow to please the onlookers. Yet her eyes, sharp, calculating, scanned everything like a hawk searching for prey. She wore a black dress of the finest silk, her gold bangles glinting under the weak sunlight. Even in mourning, she glowed with wealth and pride. Oh, my poor husband, she cried dramatically, kneeling beside the coffin. How will I live without you? Her voice carried, but there were no tears. Kofi clenched his jaw. He had seen her play this act many times before, sweet words in public, venom in private. Ever since she entered their home, she had slowly turned his father against everyone else. She had a talent for pretending to be gentle while manipulating everyone around her. As the ceremony ended, people began to leave in small groups. Madame Essie took charge immediately, directing the servants, giving orders as if she had already taken control. "Kofi," she said suddenly, turning toward him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "you should rest. I will handle your father's affairs." "My father's affairs," Kofi repeated quietly, "or your husband's wealth." Her smile vanished for a second, then returned colder. "Be careful with your tone, boy. The elders will decide soon who manages what. You're still young. Don't let pride destroy you." Before he could respond, she turned and walked away, her expensive perfume trailing behind her like smoke. Later that evening, as the last visitors left, Kofi went into his father's study, now quiet, filled only with the smell of old books and tobacco. The mahogany desk stood polished, the same desk where his father had once written letters, signed contracts, and taught Kofi about honesty. He sat down slowly and ran his fingers over the wood. That was when he noticed something: an envelope, half hidden under an old family Bible. It was sealed with red wax and wrapped in a piece of traditional kente cloth. The handwriting was unmistakable. His father's Kofi's heart skipped a beat. He broke the seal carefully, hands trembling. Inside was a short letter written in his father's neat handwriting. "My son, when I am gone, trust not the smiles of those who stand too close to your shadow. In this world, truth is the only wealth that cannot be stolen. When the time comes, you will know what to say. 2 words, my son, 2 words will protect what is ours." Kofi froze. 2 words. What could that mean? He turned the letter over, but there was nothing more. Just a faint mark at the bottom, an ancient family symbol of the earth goddess, Acacia. He folded the letter back, his chest tight. Something deep inside him told him this was no ordinary message. It was a warning. And a promise. Outside, the rain finally began to fall, soft and steady, as if washing away the false tears of the day. Kofi looked out the window toward the fields his father had built from nothing. He whispered softly to himself, "I won't let her take everything." But even then, he had no idea just how far Madame Essie would go, or how those 2 mysterious words would one day shake the very foundations of the court. Weeks passed after the funeral. But the grief that lingered in Kofi's heart had started to turn into something darker. Every morning when he walked through the courtyard, he saw men carrying boxes, servants whispering, and strange people coming and going from the compound. It was as though the home his father built was slowly being emptied, piece by piece. Madame Essie had taken charge completely. She now sat in Chief Osu's leather chair, signing papers and speaking to visitors as though she had inherited not just the estate, but the man's very power. The walls that once echoed with his father's laughter now carried only the sound of her sharp voice. One afternoon, Kofi returned from the family farm and found a group of men moving furniture. "Stop," he demanded. "Who told you to take these?" The men hesitated. Madame Essie appeared behind them, her expression calm but her tone cutting. "I did," she said. "These belong to me now. The court will soon confirm it." "What do you mean, the court?" Kofi asked, stepping closer. She smiled faintly, that same poisonous smile she always wore when she thought she was winning. "You see, my late husband made a will, dear boy. And in that will, I am the rightful owner of all his property, house, farm, and business. You and your mother's children were never legally recognized." Kofi stared at her in disbelief. "That's a lie. My father would never do that." She shrugged. "You can believe whatever comforts you. But soon, everyone will know the truth." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Kofi standing in the empty room, fury boiling inside him. The next day, a lawyer arrived from the city. Her lawyer. A tall man with slicked hair and an arrogant smirk. He carried a folder of documents that he presented as the official will of Chief Ousu. Kofi demanded to see it. The lawyer refused, saying only, "All matters will be settled before the judge." Word spread fast through the town. Gossip grew like wildfire. Some said Kofi was trying to steal from the widow. Others whispered that the stepmother had bribed officials. Even the elders, once his father's allies, now avoided him. At night, Kofi sat alone on the veranda, staring at the letter his father had left him. 2 words. What did they mean? He had read that letter 100 times, hoping for a clue. His younger sister, Ama, came and sat beside him quietly. "Brother," she said softly, I heard them saying Auntie Essie will take us to court. He nodded slowly. I know, Ama's eyes welled up, but that land its father's blood. You can't let her take it. I won't, he said firmly, even if I stand alone. The following week, Kofi received an official summons to appear in court. The stepmother's claim was clear. She wanted everything. When he arrived at the courthouse for the first hearing, Madame Essie stood by her lawyer, dressed elegantly, pretending to be the victim. The crowd whispered as she dabbed fake tears from her eyes. This young man, her lawyer announced loudly, is trying to disrespect the last wishes of his own father. We have documents and witnesses to prove that the chief intended for his loyal wife to inherit his property. Kofi's lawyer, a modest local advocate, whispered, Do you have any evidence? Kofi reached into his pocket, feeling the folded parchment, the letter, sealed in red wax. Not yet, he murmured, but I will. Madame Essie caught his gaze and smirked. You're brave, she said in a low voice, just loud enough for him to hear. But bravery won't save you. You'll leave this court with nothing, not even your father's name. Kofi said nothing, but deep inside, something in him had shifted. He finally understood this was no longer just about inheritance. It was about truth, and he was ready to fight for it, no matter the cost. That night, sleep refused to come. Kofi lay awake listening to the crickets outside and the distant bark of dogs, his mind circling the same question again and again. What were the two words his father had meant? The flickering lantern light cast long shadows across the walls, and every creak of the wooden house felt like a whisper from the past. He sat up, staring at the old envelope on the table. Finally, he decided to do something he had avoided for months. He would go to the old family shrine. It was midnight when he reached it, a small hut on the edge of the ancestral land, surrounded by tall baobab trees. The air was cool and smelled faintly of wet earth. A single oil lamp burned before a carved wooden figure of Asasja, the Earth Mother. His father had always told him that the family's strength came from her blessings. Kofi knelt before the shrine, the letter trembling in his hand. Father, he whispered, you said 2 words would protect us. What are they? I need to understand. As if in answer, a faint memory stirred in his mind, his father's voice, calm and deep. From years ago, it had been during one of their evening walks through the cocoa fields. The sun had been low, painting the leaves gold. His father had said, there are truths the courts cannot see, Kofi. There is justice deeper than paper and ink. One day, when your heart tells you that men's words are not enough, you must speak the words of the earth. The oath will reveal what lies in darkness. Kofi had laughed back then, thinking it was just one of his father's old superstitions. But now, those words felt like prophecy. He remembered another night, stormy, the wind howling through the house. His father had called him to the study. Kofi, he had said, promise me something. If greed ever tries to destroy this family, go to the shrine and remember our oath. The earth never lies. Then he had drawn a symbol on Kofi's palm using ash and palm wine. These are the words of power, he whispered, Asasja. Say them only when truth is buried under lies. The ancestors will hear. Kofi's breath caught in his throat. Asasja. Those were the 2 words. He repeated them quietly, and the lamp flickered violently, its flame stretching high before settling again. The air grew heavier, as if the spirits had truly awoken. A deep calm washed over him, not fear, but purpose. The next morning, he returned home just as dawn painted the sky pink. He found Ama waiting on the porch, eyes swollen from crying. They're saying Auntie Essie has found more documents, she said. She's even called people to testify that father gave her everything. Kofi placed a hand on her shoulder. Let her gather all the lies she wants, he said softly. The truth is older than her papers. Later that day, he met with his lawyer again. She's got influence, the lawyer warned. Her people are ready to swear false oaths. Unless you have something strong, we'll lose. Kofi nodded slowly. I do, he said, something stronger than all her witnesses. The lawyer looked puzzled, but Kofi didn't explain. He only touched the folded letter in his pocket, feeling the weight of the red seal. That night, he went back to the shrine one last time. He poured libation on the ground, murmuring his father's name, his grandfather's, and all who came before. The earth seemed to hum softly under his feet. When he stood up, his decision was clear. He would face Madame Essie in court, not just with evidence, but with the power of his ancestors behind him. For too long, lies had ruled the living. It was time for the earth itself to speak. The morning of the trial arrived with a gray sky hanging low over the town. The courthouse, an old colonial building with peeling white paint and tall wooden doors, stood like a sleeping giant waiting to awaken. People from all around Asaboy gathered outside, farmers, traders, neighbors, even strangers who had come to witness the drama that had become the town's greatest gossip. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with tension. The sound of murmuring voices filled the space like the hum of bees. Some came out of curiosity, others for justice. But everyone knew that today's hearing would not be ordinary. Kofi entered quietly, dressed in a simple white shirt and dark cloth wrapped around his waist. He carried nothing but his father's sealed letter in his pocket. His lawyer, Mr. Osei, a humble but sincere man, stood beside him. Across the room sat Madame Essie, radiant in a flowing black gown with gold earrings. Her face was calm, but her eyes glittered with confidence. Beside her, her lawyer Mr. Badu whispered something in her ear, making her smirk. The judge entered the room, an elderly man named Justice Nyarko, known for his stern reputation. Court is now in session, he announced, striking his gavel. Mr. Badu rose first, his voice smooth and polished. Your Honor, this case is simple. My client, Madame Essie Owusu, is the legal wife of the late Chief Owusu. She stands before you today, not as a conqueror, but as a widow seeking fairness. We have here the final will of the late chief, signed and witnessed, granting her full control of his estate. He held up a folder dramatically, then handed it to the clerk. Kofi's lawyer whispered, "That document is a forgery. I can feel it." Kofi's eyes stayed on the so-called will, his heart pounding. He thought of his father's words. When the time comes, you will know what to say. The judge looked at Kofi. Do you have a response, young man? Mr. Osei stood. Your Honor, we dispute the authenticity of that document. We believe it is a fabrication, designed to strip my client of his lawful inheritance. Chief Owusu had children before marrying Madame Essie, and he never revoked his promise to them. We will prove it. A wave of murmurs ran through the courtroom. Madame Essie rolled her eyes, whispering something that made her lawyer smile smugly. Then came the witnesses, one after another. They testified for Madame Essie, house servants, claiming that the chief loved her most. Business partners swearing she was his closest confidant. Some spoke hesitantly, others with practiced certainty. When one of the elders, known for his honesty, took the stand, Kofi felt a flicker of hope. But even he said, "The chief told me once, before he died, that his wife would handle everything." His tone was strange, as if forced. Kofi clenched his fists under the table. It was clear now money had bought more than just lawyers. When it was Kofi's turn, he stood calmly. His lawyer asked, "Did your father ever tell you about his will?" "Yes," Kofi said firmly, "but not the one she carries. My father left something else, something older than paper." Mr. Badu laughed loudly. "Ah, so now we speak of magic, not law." Kofi looked straight at him. "Sometimes, truth needs no ink." The judge silenced the courtroom with a glare. "Enough. Continue." Kofi reached into his pocket and held up the old envelope. "This," he said, "was given to me by my father before he died. It holds his real words." Mr. Badu objected. "Unverified. It could be a fabrication." But the judge gestured for Kofi to approach. As Kofi placed the letter on the desk, thunder rumbled faintly outside. The judge examined the red seal, frowning. "This mark," he whispered. "It's the symbol of Asas Yatha, Earth Mother." Madame Essie's face stiffened, but she quickly composed herself. Kofi said quietly, "My father was a man of both faith and tradition. He left me not just his land, but his truth, and when the time is right, I will speak the words he taught me." The judge looked uneasy, but nodded. "We will reconvene tomorrow. Bring whatever evidence you can. The court will hear your truth." As the gavel struck, the storm outside finally broke. Rain began to pour, beating against the old windows like drums. Kofi turned to leave, his clothes damp from the first drops. Behind him, Madame Essie's voice hissed softly through clenched teeth. "You can't win, boy. This world doesn't run on your father's spirits." The next morning, the storm had passed, but the sky still wore the bruised gray of a restless night. The courthouse steps were slick with rain, and puddles shimmered like mirrors beneath the heavy clouds. People gathered again. Word had spread that yesterday's hearing ended strangely. That thunder had followed the boy's promise of ancestral truth. Kofi arrived early, calm and composed, though his heart raced beneath his white shirt. In his pocket, the parchment remained safe, its red seal now worn and faint. He felt its weight not of paper, but of destiny. When Madame Essie entered, heads turned. She was dressed in deep blue this time, as if mourning had turned to confidence. Her lawyer, Mr. Badu, walked beside her like a vulture proud of its prey. They both smiled at the crowd, shaking hands. Pretending grace. The judge took his seat, eyes tired, lips pressed in a thin line. The atmosphere was tense, brittle, like glass, ready to crack. "Proceed," he said. Mr. Badu rose. "Your Honor, yesterday the boy claimed to hold the real words of the late Chief, Oyusu. We have verified our will through the Registrar It bears signatures, witnesses, and official stamps. We ask the court to dismiss this childish claim." The judge turned to Kofi. "Do you still wish to speak?" Kofi nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor, but not to argue, only to reveal." He stepped forward slowly, pulling the parchment from his pocket. Its seal glistened faintly in the light. "My father's letter," he said softly, "was not meant for lawyers or stamps. It was meant for truth." Madame Essie scoffed. "Truth? That's not evidence, that's superstition." Kofi ignored her. He unfolded the letter carefully, revealing his father's handwriting. He wrote that when lies threatened our family, I should speak to words, words that awaken the earth to witness the living. Mr. Badu laughed. "Your Honor, this is nonsense. We deal in law, not legend." But the judge didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the parchment. He recognized the family symbol, the sigil of Assessja, the oath of the earth. It was something sacred, something most judges dared not even mention aloud. Kofi turned toward the judge. His voice lowered, steady but filled with something ancient. "My father said that when human law becomes blind, the earth will see. Shall I let the earth speak, Your Honor?" The judge hesitated. "You understand the gravity of what you're invoking?" "Yes," Kofi said simply. The room fell silent. Even Madame Essie's lips stopped moving. The rain outside slowed, and the wind grew still. Kofi stepped closer to the bench, leaned forward, and whispered the two words his father had taught him. "Assess, Ja." The effect was immediate. The judge froze. His face turned pale, his eyes wide as if a ghost had entered the room. He slowly removed his glasses, his breathing shallow in that silence. The wooden walls seemed to creak and sigh. A gust of air swept through the open window, scattering papers, flickering the lamps. The judge's voice trembled. "Who told you? Who told you to say that?" "My father," Kofi said calmly. "He said you would understand." The judge's gaze shifted to the seal again, then to Kofi. He looked like a man torn between worlds, one of law, one of spirits. He knew what those words meant. They were an ancient call of truth, an oath that no man could fake. One that forced the liar to face the curse of the earth itself. Madame Essie's face drained of color. "This is a trick," she shouted. "Don't listen to him." But her voice broke halfway through. A crack of thunder rolled in the distance. Even though the sky had been clearing moments ago, the judge's hands shook as he spoke. "If you have lied in this court, Madame Essie, and the earth bears witness, then may your own words judge you." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Kofi stepped back, saying nothing more. The power of those two words still lingered in the air, like smoke unseen but heavy. Nignore. As the judge called for a recess, the crowd parted for Kofi as he walked out. No one dared to meet his eyes. Even those who had doubted him whispered prayers under their breath. Outside, the clouds gathered again. The earth, it seemed, was still listening. When the court reconvened after recess, the air inside the courtroom felt heavy, almost suffocating. No one spoke above a whisper. Even the fans on the ceiling seemed to turn slower, their blades creaking in rhythm with the tension that filled the room. The judge entered, his face pale and drawn. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The clerk followed him silently, holding a bundle of papers that trembled slightly in her hands. Everyone rose as he took his seat. "Court is in session," he said, but his voice was softer than before, more reverent, almost fearful. Madame Essie tried to look calm, but her hand clutched her silk handkerchief so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her lawyer leaned toward her and whispered something, but she brushed him off. Her eyes darted to Kofi and then to the window, where dark clouds had begun to gather again. The judge cleared his throat. "This court operates under the laws of the Republic," he began carefully. "But we must not forget that we live among people whose truths are older than our written words." He paused, glancing at Kofi. "I have examined the letter you brought. The seal bears the mark of the Assessja oath, on oath not taken lightly. It is a bond that, once spoken, binds the speaker to truth under the eyes of the earth itself." A murmur ran through the crowd. The old women at the back crossed their arms and whispered prayers. Even the policemen shifted uneasily. Madame Essie stood suddenly. "Your Honor, this is absurd. We are in a court of law, not a shrine. That boy is manipulating superstition to steal what belongs to me." The judge's gaze was sharp. "And yet, madam, you refused to repeat your claim after the oath was invoked. Why?" Her lips parted, but no sound came. Sweat beaded her forehead. I don't believe in such things, she stammered. Then it should not trouble you to speak your truth under the same oath, the judge replied quietly. The courtroom fell utterly silent. Kofi's eyes never left her face. Say it, he said softly. Swear to the earth that the will you hold is real. Madame Essie's breathing quickened. Her lawyer whispered urgently. Don't. It's nonsense, but just don't. She shook her head, backing a step away from the bench. I don't have to play his game, she said, but her voice trembled. I don't need to prove anything to him or his ancestors. The judge leaned forward. Then you admit nothing under the oath. Silence. The crowd held its breath. Then came a sudden clap of thunder, so loud that the windows rattled. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Madame Essie gasped and clutched her chest. An old man in the audience muttered, The earth has spoken. The judge slammed his gavel once, though his hand trembled. Order, he said, his voice cracking. He took a long breath, then continued, This court cannot ignore divine truth when it reveals human deceit. He turned to Kofi. The evidence brought by the plaintiff is hereby deemed fraudulent. The will presented lacks authenticity, and the witness statements are inconsistent. Then his eyes fell on Madame Essie. You, madam, have attempted to deceive this court, but it is not only I who judge you today. The ancestors have heard the words spoken in this room. Madame Essie broke down, her confidence shattered. Please, she cried. I didn't mean he promised me, he said I could have it all. Her lawyer looked away, ashamed. The judge struck his gavel one last time. This court declares Kofi Oyusu the rightful heir to his father's estate, land, house, and holdings. Case closed. A roar erupted from the crowd, cheers, gasps, and murmurs blending into one. Kofi stood still, his head bowed. He felt no joy, only relief, a quiet, heavy peace that settled deep inside him. As Madame Essie was escorted out, lightning flashed again. For a second, her shadow seemed to twist across the wall like smoke. Some said she fainted, others said she screamed, a name that no one heard clearly. Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft, cleansing, unending. Kofi stepped into it, letting it soak through his clothes, feeling as though the earth itself was washing away the lies of the past. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle by the time Kofi reached home. The sky was clearing, a faint rainbow stretching across the horizon like a quiet blessing from the heavens. The courtyard was empty now. The mourners, the gossipers, and the curious neighbors had all gone. Only the scent of wet earth and cocoa trees remained. He walked slowly toward his father's old chair, under the veranda, the one Madame Essie had claimed as hers just weeks before. It stood there untouched, the wood still polished, the cushions still bearing faint traces of her perfume. For the first time in months, Kofi sat there without anger. He simply closed his eyes and breathed. The house was silent, but it was no longer heavy with deceit. It felt alive again, as though the spirit of his father had finally come home. From the back of the yard, Ama appeared carrying a small calabash of water. Her face lit up when she saw him. Brother, she said, is it true? The court, you won. Kofi smiled faintly. Truth won, Ama. The rest doesn't matter. She set the calabash down and hugged him tightly. Father would be proud, she whispered. He nodded, looking toward the fields beyond. Father once told me, the land remembers who cares for it. Now, it's time we care for it again. Over the next few days, the news spread throughout As. People spoke of the trial with awe and fear. Some said the earth itself had judged the case. Others whispered that Kofi's father's spirit had appeared in the courtroom. The elders, who had once doubted him, came to his home to offer blessings. Kofi, one of them said, placing a hand on his shoulder, you reminded us that our roots are not in paper or ink, but in the soil that holds our names. He bowed respectfully. It was never about winning, he said. It was about remembering. As for Madame Essie, no one saw her in town again. Rumors drifted like smoke. Some said she left for the city, others that she fell ill soon after the judgment. A few swore they saw her wandering near the river, muttering to herself. But Kofi never spoke ill of her. Whenever Ama asked, he would only say, the earth knows what it's doing. One evening, as the sun set behind the cocoa fields, Kofi walked alone to the family shrine. The ground was still damp, the air thick with the smell of rain and leaves. He poured a libation, whispering the names of his ancestors, the men and women who had walked before him. He knelt before the statue of Asesja and laid the old parchment on the ground. Father, he said softly, your words protected us. The earth spoke through me, just as you promised. A breeze stirred the trees. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled faintly, not in anger but in approval. Kofi smiled. He whispered the two sacred words once more, this time not to invoke justice, but to offer gratitude, asais, ya. The sound seemed to sink into the soil, disappearing into the heartbeat of the earth itself. When he arose and turned to leave, he felt lighter. The curse of lies had lifted. Truth had rooted itself deep once more, stronger than before. Back home, Ama waited with a pot of stew and a soft smile. "Will you rest now, brother?" she asked. Kofi looked out at the horizon, the land his father had built, and the fields that now shimmered with new life after the rain. "Yes," he said, "but not for long. There's work to do. This land, our land, must live again." And as night fell, the stars returned to the sky, bright and calm, watching over the son who had chosen truth over greed. The whispers of the ancestors faded into the rhythm of the crickets, leaving behind only peace. For in that small town of us, people would remember for generations, greed can deceive men, but not the earth. And truth once spoken never dies.